All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the science of pronghorn. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about their evolutionary history. We're going to talk about like what these animals are, where they're found, and then kind of some cool adaptations and their behaviors that they have. So I will go ahead and share my screen with all of you. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. We're going to go ahead and talk about pronghorn like I mentioned today. They are a North American species, so we're going to be talking about them as a broad understanding of Nebraska, or sorry, of North America. And then at the very end, we'll talk a little bit about what they look like in Nebraska as far as their population goes, how are they managed, that kind of stuff. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive in. So, if you have been to a Science of or virtual program before, I hope that you ask questions. I hope that you have comments. Just make sure that you put them on relative topics that we're talking about and that you are kind to other people that are on the chat as well. If you are not, we do have that right to remove you from the program. I don't think we'll have any issues, but just letting people know. I also want to point out I'm not a pronghorn expert. I'm a science communication expert, and so taking information that's out there and making it accessible for other people. So breaking it down and just meeting people where they're at as far as that level of science goes, and then also just making that engaging and entertaining for a lot of people as well. So let's go ahead and start here. So pronghorn, when we talk about them, I will talk about here in a little bit about their like taxonomy and where they fit with lots of different types of other animals. But also we can't ignore the fact that humans have played a large part in their history of the grasslands and even in Nebraska. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about pronghorns and like the people that kind of made them, I guess, and talked about them and what they are today. So when European explorers came to the New World between the 16th and 19th centuries, they obviously encountered a lot of new plants and animals that they've never seen before. And one of those was the pronghorn. So generally, when they discovered a animal, they named it after some type of version of an animal that they have seen in the past or that they were familiar with. So that's how we got a lot of our current names for a lot of these animals. Some of them fit, some of them do not fit. And even today, some of them are being changed. So many had close relatives, but some were very different when they came up with a name. Pronghorn was kind of one of those. And so the first non-Indigenous explorer to describe this type of animal was Pedro de Castaneda. He was someone that came along in 1540 and described them as, quote, flocks of goats that were so fast that they disappeared very quickly. So, which makes sense. If you've ever seen a pronghorn, and we'll talk about this later, they are extremely fast. They're very good runners. They have lots of adaptations that help them run very quickly. So it's no surprise that even in 1540, when people saw them, when the non-Indigenous explorers came over and other people saw them, that they were still extremely fast. So later in 1776, people noted that they were called Barendos, which were a Spanish word that actually means two-colored. And if you go to Mexico today, that's still the same word that they use today. So very frequent when people talk about them. Sorry, I'm letting people in here. All right. And then in 1804, we've all heard about Lewis and Clark. They saw them along the Niobrara River and they called them goat-like antelopes. So lots of names for them. I feel like they're almost like the mountain lion. There's lots of different names for them. Sometimes people don't even know what they are. But with pronghorn, there's lots of different words. People in Nebraska call them antelope, pronghorn. I feel like all of those except antelope are correct. It's kind of hard to correct people though. It's like the bison, buffalo thing, but here we are. So pronghorn, we're going to talk about pronghorn today and we're going to call them pronghorn. So there was this person named George Ord who gave them their first scientific name back in 1815, and that was Antelope americanus. So a little bit different than what we have today. 3 years later, in 1818, they actually changed that name to be Antilocapra americana, which is their same scientific name as they have today. So that one kind of stuck a little bit more. One of the things is when people came and the white people came and they found these animals, these earliest European explorers, they didn't really provide a drawing of what they looked like. So trying to describe this goat-like antelope to people, there wasn't really anything for them to show. So not really until 1775, and then they had this drawing. So while Europeans were out there and they weren't familiar with them, Native Americans obviously knew them very well. So 330 names for these animals have been recorded in over 219 Native American languages. They were an important source of protein and they were extensively hunted throughout their range during that time. So we owe actually the Native Americans the first depictions of what these pronghorn looked like. The earliest secured dating, as far as we know, the pronghorn images, they consisted of about a dozen ceramic bowls from what's called the Mimbres culture in New Mexico. They have this really cool stylized look to them, but they're very, very recognizable as pronghorns. And I'll actually show you a picture here. So here was the first 1775 version of these Europeans that came across and were like, here's what we're seeing. It's not a bad image. I am not an artist by any means, but this one also was the first from that Mimbres pronghorn on those ceramic uh, bowls, sorry, that we were talking about earlier. So clearly it has that fun kind of specialized look, but you can tell it's a pronghorn from the pronged horns on its head. So we know what we're looking at here. And then this one was a little bit more of that modern day artistic look that we kind of still see today in a lot of those scientific journals. So. All right, so that was really quick, just these animals and people and how they've kind of shaped that history of them. So let's move away from people and talk about the evolutionary history of pronghorn in general. So taxonomy, kind of where they fit with all these different types of animals. So today, their scientific name is Antilocapra americana. Again, in the 1818, it was changed. So when you break that genus down, Antilo means antelope. Capro means male goat. So a little bit different than we think about them because they're not goats at all. But pronghorn are the only surviving species of the North American ungulate family. So ungulate meaning hooved animals. Family, which is Antilocapridae. So they are the only species in this family. So that makes them one right there, very, very neat and interesting as far as how they fit into this genetic tree and all the different types of animals and where they fit with the other hooved animals as well. So this Antilocapridae family, so like bovids, which are cows, so pronghorns have horns that consist of this keratinized sheath over a bony core. But unlike bovids whose horns are permanent, so cows don't lose them, the horn sheath is actually shed annually and it's regrown. So deer antlers, they don't have sheaths on them, but those antlers are lost and they're regrown yearly. So when people always ask, how do you describe like a pronghorn's horns? It's kind of a bit of both. So it's a little bit of that cervids or those deer, and it's a little bit of the cows. It's kind of like in the middle. So they do shed parts of it annually, but they also have that bony core that is permanent. So they have a little bit of both. In today's modern taxonomy, again, scientists are very, they sometimes it's hard to make up your mind and it's hard to agree on things like anybody. So 5 subspecies have been named, but genetic evidence really only suggests that there's 3 subspecies that should be recognized. So. All right, so pronghorn, they've long been considered to be endemic. So basically their entire evolutionary history has become from North America. So their earliest fossil relative of the living pronghorn in North America is about 28 million years old. So scientists kind of think that they evolved in the New World in North America, and they had really no close relatives in the Old World. But again, on the other side of the spectrum, there's people that believe the opposite, that they came from this Old World and they have ancient ancestors. So it's hard to make that call because I obviously haven't been studying these for years. But during that 28 million years of pronghorn evolution in North America, they developed this really wide diversity. So there's actually lots, not now, but there were lots of different types of pronghorn that appeared after that time. However, all of them have become extinct except for this one species. So one of the main problems today still is determining where the living pronghorns fit in. So again, it's really hard because their antlers and horns, they're kind of some of the same. They have hooves, so they're ungulate animals, but they look like something that you would find in Africa, like along the watering hole in Africa. They look more antelope-like than cervid or deer-like. But none of the fossil species that we have talked about are really closely related to them, and people don't really consider them satisfactory ancestors. They have different horn forms. They were four different types that lived during the Ice Age alone. So their genetic history is very, very interesting. So I know we've all probably seen pronghorn, but I think they're really cool. And anytime that I get to share a video of you, the hair rostrum or their like nose area is so long when you look at them on a profile view. And their horns, obviously, you can see how they get their name pronghorn because unlike a deer on those tines, these guys actually have that forked or the pronged horns, hence their name. All right, so their evolutionary history, antilocaprid ancestors most likely evolved in the Old World, migrated to North America during the late Oligocene. Pronghorn also evolved alongside different types of predators, which one of the reasons is why they are so fast. So dire wolves, the short-faced bear, we had the North American lion, jaguars, hyenas, and cheetahs. Pronghorn were most likely prey for this species. So over time, they developed this evolution of speed. So the most anatomical characters that are used to describe the pronghorn and its fossils relatives seem to place them really similar to the deer family or the cervids. However, recent phylogenetic analysis says that the pronghorn family is actually closest related to giraffes or the Giraffidae family. So I can kind of see it if you squint and look to the side. They do kind of look like a giraffe, but overall, their phylogenetic history gets them close to a giraffe. So it forms then that sister group to cervids and bovids, so the deer and the cows, or a sister group to all other of those horned ruminants that we have kind of talked about. All right, so this diverse family, so pronghorn is unique to North America. Their entire evolutionary path and their current distribution is solely of this continent. So not many species can say that. The first pronghorn-like ancestors, they appeared in the fossil record about 19 million years ago. Their horns were this odd array, very diverse shapes. They kind of looked like old miniature moose, deer, cattle. Some had really long horns, some had spiraled horns, some had forked horns. Some even like towards the Pleistocene era, when I was looking through this, there was like I said, 19 different types. And they had two, sometimes four, sometimes six horns on each side. So pronghorn have gotten very diverse, but again, all of them have been extinct except for this one that we have here. So there's 18 different forms of primitive pronghorn, and those fossils show characteristics all associated with these very fast runners. So it appears that they have been speeding through millions of years. All right, so these two subfamilies that we talked about in ancient terms, the pronghorn family, that Antilocapridae family, right now is grouped into two subfamilies. So there's the Mericodonts and the Antilocaprines. So both groups are part of the same family. The Antilocapridae family, which is unique to North America. So these things called these Mericodonts appeared about 19 million years ago. They were kind of the first ones. And by the time that they started fading, this other group came in, the Antilocaprines, about 9 million years ago, and they were kind of rising to their peak time. The Mericodonts were the first in a very long line of that diverse evolutionary line that led to the modern day pronghorn. So Some of the earliest antilocaprines, they coexisted with the really late mericodonts, but they did represent different stages in the evolutionary family. The antilocaprines were a little bit more advanced in certain traits. The mericodonts were a little bit more of the primitive ancestral forms of the pronghorn lineage, but the antilocaprines kind of represent the more derived or the more specialized forms, which now include that pronghorn, that American, North American pronghorn, the modern day one that we see today. So this is all confusing, so I made a chart, found a chart for you guys. So looking at them, the Mericodonts and the Antilocaprines, they kind of overlapped in certain areas, but they also were very different. So the Mericodonts, they're generally a little bit smaller. The Antilocaprines, they had a larger body size on them. The horn shapes were a little different. The teeth were different. Their diet was a little different, just given the time period that they lived in. So they did have different types of horns as well. So just kind of showing you those key distinctions between the two of them. All right, so what all the things that I've kind of said so far is that these guys are fast. So they've definitely developed this kind of evolution of speed. So the modern pronghorn survived the last ice age because it had the right adaptation. So it was most famous for their speed. They can run at about 60 miles an hour, regardless of their true maximum speed. They are undoubtedly the fastest land mammal on this continent. So second in the world, obviously behind the cheetah. Antilocaprids were already built for speed for most of their 19 million year evolution. The earliest known mericodonts had these really long, slender limbs, and that usually means they're adapted to a running lifestyle. If you look at any of these modern day animals or ungulates, that's the same thing. Deer, elk, even moose, they have these really long legs that are usually adapted to run fast. And it also has been said that the ability to run fast kind of co-evolved with the now extinct what was called the North American cheetah-like cat. It had a very similar geographic distribution as the antilocaprids, but we'll talk more about that later. All right, so here's a video. I couldn't find one of them full out sprinting, but they look so silly when they run. Um, they're just kind of cool. They kind of bounce. One of the things that we'll talk about later is that deer can jump over fences. These guys are not jumpers, and we'll talk about why that is. But if you've ever seen them full out sprint, it's a very unique style. All right, so there is this idea of the North American cheetah. It was a real life thing. It was actually not like a true cheetah. It was more actually related to our mountain lions now. But what's really interesting is that there's this thing called the just so story. And if you've ever heard the phrase, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, that kind of fits with this. So there's a lot of fossil evidence that challenges the North American cheetah story and how the cheetah and the pronghorn kind of developed together and similarly, kind of like the evolutionary arms race. One became faster, so the other one had to become faster and kind of so forth. So it was coined, this just so story was coined by an evolutionary ecologist called Stephen Gould. He had these explanations of how a trait evolved and presented, and it just must have happened just so. So the fossil evidence kind of challenges this North American cheetah story. And basically, the North American cheetah versus the pronghorn is mostly a myth. Many writers have really popularized this story and its compelling science just because it sounds fantastic. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not true or that it's true. So, it's almost too good to be true. So science is based on evidence, not just a good story. So the cheetah usually shows up about 3.5 million years ago. But it is true that most of these animals, these pronghorns, they really developed over time to become fast because there was a lot of ambush predators in the grasslands. But not necessarily all the time. There were high-speed chases. It's kind of an interesting story, and I thought that was funny. But there's still a lot of stuff out there that does talk about the cheetah, the North American cheetah. So I'll let you kind of read more into that, but I thought it was kind of worth mentioning. So All right, so that was a little bit about the people history of pronghorn and also just their evolutionary history. I think it's always interesting to see where these animals are coming from and where they fit as far as lots of other types of animals that are similar to them. So now I'm just going to kind of talk to you guys a little bit about this modern day pronghorn and what makes it so unique. So first of all, their geographic range. These guys are found throughout what are called treeless plains, so they don't like trees, obviously. They have basins. They're also found in the deserts of Western North America. They have a distribution of population in its range, but it's discontinuous. So that means that when you look at them, it's not one huge map. It's kind of spattered into little spaces over time. So for all the way from the southern prairie province of Canada, all the southward, all the way to the United States, and even into northern Mexico. So they have quite a wide range, but again, it's discontinuous. Interestingly enough, in 1959, a population was introduced in Hawaii. Didn't go well. 1983, the population was roughly 12, and it was headed for extinction. And they are no longer there on the island anymore. Specifically in Nebraska, they're found in the western and central parts of the state, and their highest concentrations are in the panhandle of Nebraska and the Sandhills region. The easternmost edge of the species range is kind of about um, where we are in Nebraska, overall is the easternmost range. So wherever that is in Nebraska, where they kind of hang out on the eastern western side, they don't really get much farther east. You're not going to see them in Lincoln. You're not going to see them in Kentucky, that kind of stuff. All right, so what kind of habitat are they liking? So pronghorn, they primarily found in grasslands. This is their habitat. Sage scrub, deserts, lots of different types of area. They also found throughout the rest of their range. They're common in these sage scrub areas. They really like areas of dense shrubs with tough leaves. Their range kind of goes all the way from sea level to about 3,500 meters above. They need freestanding and fresh water with the moisture content of the vegetation they consume. So it kind of depends on what they're eating. They eat a lot of the scrub. They eat a lot of the forbs, the sage, that kind of stuff. And then so it depends on how much water they need depending on where they're found. So they may need to travel a very large, long distance to find water. In Nebraska, they are actually known as short distance migrators. So the greatest concentration we have is in the sandhills of Nebraska. About this time of year, the amount of food is very scarce. So they're moving those short distances even up to like 30 miles and 30 miles. It's not very long, but they're moving out of the sandhills to find better forage quality. And then during those spring and summer months, they move back into the sandhills. So they do have long distance migrations in other parts of the country. In Nebraska, it's very short distance. We have the habitat for them. We just need it a little bit outside the sandhills just because it's winter and times are hard. All right, so physical description. Pronghorns have true horns. They're made from modified or fused hair that grows over their permanent bony cores. I'll show you a picture of this here in a second. They differ from other horned animals in a couple ways. So the sheaths are shed, those black portions that you see, those are shed every year, and they are pronged. And then the adult males have about 10 to 16-inch horns that are curved at the tip, or they prong. Females, about 70% of females also have horns, but they're a lot smaller and they're not pronged. They only get about 1 to 2, maybe 3 to 4 inches long, but males are going to be very much larger and pretty noticeable as well. The males will usually shed those horny sheaths in November, December, and then again, they begin growing the next year in about February or March. Females will shed and regrow their horns kind of at various times throughout the year. They have these deer-like bodies. They're reddish, kind of tan colors on the back, and they have white underneath, and they have a very large white rump patch on them as well. And then their eyes are very large, provides them with a very good field of vision. Males will also have this black cheek patch on them as well. All right, so here's just an idea of what you're looking at, males versus females. Males, again, have these very large, long, pronged horns on them. Females, this one actually does have horns. You can see them, they're very tiny. They don't get much larger than that. So females will lose those kind of at various times throughout the year. Males, during that time when they need them for the rut, there's a specific season that they will lose horns, very similar to our deer or cervids that we have here. All right, if you've ever touched a pronghorn or even just looking at them, their hair is so coarse, very similar to a deer, but their fur is interesting. It's very dense, it's coarse, and it's air-filled. So this actually helps them with insulation, and it helps them thermoregulate or keep their body cool or keep their body warm. They have these really neat hairs called guard hairs, just like deer. They're hollow and they're underlain by these really finer, short under hairs. So guard hairs, what happens for heat regulation, they can erect them or kind of fluff them up. And as the air becomes trapped in the fur, the more insulated they are from those external temperatures. So that's how they do so well in the Nebraska winters. Males also have these short black manes on their neck. They get about 70 to 100 millimeters in length. And they also have a neck patch and a black stripe that runs across the forehead. Females do not have these black facial patches, but they have a small mass of black hair around their nose. And then pronghorns have this kind of patch of white erectile fur. You can kind of see it on this one on their rumps. That's really visible at long distances away. And then depends on what population in North America that you are looking at, depends on how bright or pale they are. So southern populations are going to be a little bit more pale overall in color than the ones up north. The ones in Nebraska, I believe this picture was actually taken in Nebraska. I feel like they're a very pretty color, that really reddish brown color, but a lot of the other pictures when I was looking at, they're not as pretty. They're very pale. So those would be those southern species as well, or sorry, those southern populations as well. All right, eyes. They have enormous eyes, better to see you with. But they have very large eyes. They have fantastic vision. They have these very large protruding eyes. They appear to be located on the side of their head, very similar to prey animals. Eyes on the side, I hide. Eyes in the front, I hunt. But they're oriented a little forward so that they can have this what's called binocular vision. It's limited, but it still helps them have this wide field of view so that they can see things very far away. They have the largest eyes of any North American ungulate in relation to its body size. So each eyeball is about 1.4 inches in diameter. That's a huge eyeball. And they have a nearly 300-degree arc of vision without ever moving their head. This helps them detect what's ahead of them for about 4 miles. So they can see about 4 miles away, and they have a almost an inch and a half big eyeball. So pretty insane for them to have that. And then the horns. So these are forked or branching horns. It is that distinguishing feature of the antilocaprid family. So no other family has this. Obviously, deer have weird antlers at times. Elk have strange antlers. Moose have strange antlers, but they're not pronged and they're not forked or branching like these guys. So very unique to these animals. Also, what's unique is both sexes can carry horns. We mentioned earlier about 70% of females can carry horns. They sometimes are stunted or underdeveloped, and then females also have horns with no sheath on them. So it's interesting because we all know males don't have antlers, males have antlers, females do not. They're developed by about 3 years of age. They're black and they're composed of a permanent bony interior knob that's then covered by this keratin sheath. It is shed annually like antlers, and whoops, it's used in male competitions, very similar to a deer. So during the rut or the breeding time, they will use thrusts and they counter thrust to try to gore their opponents. So this is all about social hierarchy, which genetically fitness males are the best to breed with the other with the other females. They're also curving back and they're slightly inward near the tips, each with one broad short prong that juts forward and slightly upward, and it's usually about halfway up the base. So halfway up the base of the horn, you kind of see it goes out. That's about halfway from the bottom to the top. And if this does not make sense, here's a diagram for you. So underneath those black pieces, they just come off. They're shed. Those are the keratin sheaths. They're shed every year. And then underneath them, there is a bone. It is a permanent bone that does not go away. So again, it has both characteristics of a cervid or the deer family, and also characteristics of a bovid or those the sheep or the cows. All right, so their limbs, they're super long. They are specialized for the way that they move. They have very lightweight but strong bones because they're needing for maximum speed. You cannot be a heavy animal and move as fast as you can. The front hooves are actually larger than the back ones, and they have pads that act like this shock spring so that they can move faster. They're almost like absorbers. They cushion the leg bones when they impact and they run. They also have an enlarged heart, lungs, and trachea to provide extra oxygen. So when they're moving around, one of the things that these guys also do not have are collarbones, so which helps them have a little bit more room in the front for leg movement. And then that flexibility, the long legs, they have these very long strides. So when they're moving, their top speed, when they're running as fast as they can cover in one stride about 29 feet. That's insane. So a pronghorn could travel the length of a football field in 3.5 seconds in about 10 strides. So yeah, kind of interesting. They are the fastest known New World mammal. They also, like I mentioned, they have these modified joints that act as hinges, and they also have these cool adaptations. They can't jump because they've lost that suspension mechanism that cervids have. So if you ever see pronghorns come up to a fence, they will not jump over it. They literally can't. So they kind of avoid fenced-in areas, whereas cervids or deer or elk, they have no problem jumping over those fences. So, but again, they have cervids like deer, they cannot run as fast as these pronghorns. So they've given up some different adaptations to be able to jump, whereas pronghorn have given up that ability to jump to have speed instead. So. All right. Again, could not find a great video of them like full out sprinting, but just looking at their legs, the front is bigger than the back. They have these long jointed legs. They look kind of clunky when they walk, but if you ever watch them sprint, they are amazingly graceful, which is interesting. So when you run really fast, you tend to get overheated. Your brain literally gets overheated. I mean, I don't have this problem, but apparently some people do. But what happens is that these animals, they have exceptionally long windpipes, lungs, and they have hearts that take in and circulate more oxygen-rich blood than other types of mammals. Basically, this all determines how fast the animal can run or how fast it can exercise, basically. Pronghorns are like this extreme example of evolutionary specialization for high oxygen consumption. So overall, they have more concentration of hemoglobin in their blood. And then when compared to the body weight to different types of animals, that specific consumption of oxygen, pronghorns have values that are 3 times higher than expected for their body size. So they have to be able to take in more oxygen because they're running at such a sustained speed. So not only are they fast, but they can run at a sustained speed. It's not like a cheetah that, spits out after a minute or two. These guys, you can't run as fast as a cheetah, but they can run longer. So this high oxygen consumption makes pronghorns Earth's fastest sustained runner. They have exceptionally large lungs, like I talked about, compared to their body size, and they also have this really cool ability to maintain those high rates of blood circulation. So unlike cheetahs, which are the fastest animals on the planet, pronghorns produce ATP, which is required to run fast aerobically. So very different than a cheetah. All right, so reproducing, they are polygynous. So that means that the males will have multiple partners. During the time of breeding season, they will defend a small harem of females in their territory. Males, very similar to lots of other types of ungulates, they will defend their territories from a certain time of the year. So March through the end of the rut in early October. They will have scent glands that emit pheromones or special chemicals in the air that attract or identify different types of mates. These scent glands are located on the side of their jaw, between their hooves, on the rump, and also above the tail. The glands in the neck are larger in males, just because that's thought with the sexual interaction, that they have more also during that rutting season, because this is the time they all have to be able to mate, and then the females have to be able to have babies within a certain time. Otherwise, the fawns aren't going to survive. So that's why that there's a rutting season. I thought that was really interesting. Like all these animals, they have to breed during a certain time and they all come in the same cycle as each other. The females do, so they all have babies at the same time. Otherwise, those fawns aren't going to survive. So before mating, a male will approach a female from behind. He will shake his head and he will emit those pheromones to attract the female. If this works, they will obviously mate. Obviously, there's lots of other males out there that would also like a chance to mate. So there's a lot of interaction between male pronghorns and male pronghorns. So there's a lot of intimidation. Sometimes they will stare at each other. Sometimes they paw the ground. Sometimes they even will have fights. Those head-to-head battles, on average, they only last about 2 minutes, but they often result in serious injury. We've seen a lot of that before in males. I feel like a lot of the times, especially in deer, I see a lot of pictures recently where the antlers actually interlock and they get stuck together. That is like, I mean, it's cool to see afterwards, but also it's interesting that they don't completely just gore each other. So that's the idea, is that they are literally fighting for their opportunity to mate. All right, so breeding occurs mid-September to October in northern parts of the range, and usually July to October in the southern parts of the range. Females will give birth to 1 or 2 fawns in the spring. The gestation period is about 252 days, and like we talked about, those births are synchronous, so they all give birth, the females, within a few days of each other, just so that those fawns are able to have the best chance of survival. So females will also form these really young bands in the summer, and so they roam over these specific territories that are looked over by a certain male, and then or sometimes several males, and he will, kind of take care of them while the females raise the young. Males, just like many deer, they don't really have any role in raising the young. So females also, they will care for their young for about a year to a year and a half after they give birth, and then the young will become independent. One of the things I found is that the females, like many animals, when they give birth in the wild, they will eat the afterbirth. For the next few weeks, females will eat the excrement or the poop of all their young, simply to cover their tracks. So obviously, they're very fast animals. They have a couple days, especially the young, where they're very vulnerable to predators, and this is the time. So to help give them even an extra chance, the females will eat the excrement of the young and the afterbirth to cover up any trail or scent that she can, so predators can't find their baby. So, so the first few weeks of their life, they will do that to kind of prevent detection from predators. And then overall, within a few days of birth, those young pronghorns can outrun a human. Humans are so lame. And they begin to travel and forage with their mother and other females and young in the summer bands. And then again, about a year, year and a half, they will go on their own and become independent from each other. All right, so what are they eating? They are herbivores. They're ungulates, they're herbivores, so they're eating a lot of stems, leaves, grasses, shrubs. Pronghorns have been described as dainty feeders. They feed on small amounts of a wide variety of plants. They do like things that are forbs. They have high water content, which is really preferred in the summer diet. Grasses are usually only eaten when there is new growth, so they're dainty eaters. In the southern populations, they've been observed eating cacti quite a bit. Very similar to lots of different types of ruminants, but they use foregut fermentation with rumination to break down that cellulose or those really tricky plant parts. Their stomach is enlarged. It's compartmentalized into 4 chambers like a cow, very similar to other ruminants. And then when those tender leaves are available, sometimes they have moisture content of about 75%. So pronghorns don't need to find that freestanding water. So the more that they can eat that's young, that's better, that has a higher water content, the less time that they have to spend looking for some type of free water source. So pronghorns are also considered a pretty valuable part of rangeland management because they will eat noxious weeds. There's a lot of animals out there that would not go well for them. All right, here is a pronghorn eaten. I know a lot of people that do hunt them. So in Nebraska, they are managed as a game species. I know a lot of people that hunt them always talk about they taste very sagey, like they have a lot of sage on the meat. So that's what they're eating. All right, so they are fast, but they also do have predators. So a lot of fawns or those weaker pronghorn, they're preyed on, depends on the range. Coyotes, bobcats, wolves, mountain lions, even golden eagles. There are some interesting YouTube videos of golden eagles finding very young pronghorn and goats and throwing them off the side of a cliff, and then going down and eating them later. So depending on where their range is, but could be other predators as well. So pronghorns, they obviously use their horns to help defend themselves, but mostly they're using their speed to escape predators. They're also using their feet when they're fighting off predators as well. Those hooves pack a punch. They have really good eyesight. They can spot an object from approximately 2 to 4 miles away. And then pronghorns, it's interesting because they're super curious animals. They'll actually move towards you, towards an intruder, until they can detect what it is. And then once they realize if it's danger, they turn around, they fluff up the erectile uh, hair on their rumps, kind of acts as like a key to other animals to let them know, like, hey, something's wrong. So very similar to like a flagging white-tailed deer that will put its tail up. That's a sign like, hey, something's wrong, get out of here. So pronghorn will fluff up their rumps and it kind of lets other pronghorn know that something's not right. All right, and then so that was kind of pretty much about like pronghorn. I wanted to spend a couple slides just talking, since we are in Nebraska, like what do pronghorn populations look like in Nebraska? So Nebraska pronghorn, they are managed as a game species, so there's a hunting season for them. They are called one of the most challenging big game experiences out there. Herds were on the brink of extinction in Nebraska about 1907. All hunting seasons were closed. However, with management of them, there's been a very slow expansion that occurred for the next 50 years. And then hunting seasons have been held every single year since 1958. So that just simply means that their populations are well enough and well off that they can hold those hunting seasons. All right, and there is this lab in UNL. It's called the Awesome Lab. It's SOM, I think is what it is, but it is the Applied Wildlife Ecology and Spatial Movement Lab, so AWESM, sorry. And Game and Parks and UNL work really close together, and they did a study back in 2021, 2022. So in 2021, this team worked with this helicopter crew to capture and radio collar 80 individual pronghorn in western Nebraska. The study really aimed to look at their movement, their resource selection. So what are they using as a habitat, as food, as a water source, that kind of stuff. Their migration corridors, so where are they going? And then how well do the adults survive? So they collared 80 individuals in western Nebraska. And then in 2022, they added 30 additional pronghorn with GPS collars. They were captured. And so these collars, they gave the precise location of every individual every 2.5 hours. So that's a lot of data. So that is 80 plus 30, so 110 different pronghorn, and then every 2.5 hours for every single one, it gives you the perfect location of where these animals are. So really good data to have. And then what happened was in 2023, the collars remained on the animal, and then they automatically dropped off and were connected to biologists, and they went and collected them out in the field. So we got a lot of really good data on them. They're still analyzing a lot of that data, but overall, they just want to know, like, where are these animals moving, and what are they using as resources, and how can we better manage them as a game species and also as a native species in Nebraska with all this data. So it's kind of interesting. I'm hoping to see, what comes from this after a couple years of analyzing that data. So I think that was it. Yep. So that's all I got for you guys. We have one more science of. In December, we're going to be talking about shrikes, which are birds. So kind of a fun way to end the year. And then I don't have my schedule for 2026, but I think it'll be very similar to what we did this year. It's kind of just once a month on a monthly time frame with individual registrations for each. So I think that's all I got. If you guys are interested, like I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we have a lot of information on our YouTube channel. We have a lot of science of videos on there. There's got to be close to about 90 of them now. This one will get up there tomorrow morning, so give me about 12, maybe 24 hours to get this up for you. But then you can share that and watch it again as well. So we also have a good Facebook and Instagram account if you're looking at getting some more information and also just kind of keeping up to date on what's happening in Nebraska. And then our wildlife education website as well. All right, so thanks everyone. We'll see you in December. I'm going to close out of this and stop sharing and then see if we have any questions or comments as far as what this goes. So looks like we don't. So that's okay. It's either that or I overwhelmed you. So again, thank you everyone for coming. I will get this out to everyone that registered if you wanted to share it. I will also be giving some links. So some of the stuff that I've talked about. So if you want to dive more into that, you can. Um, Oh, what about smell? Yeah, I didn't really cover smell. We only just have so much time, but I could do a really cool link for you guys if you wanted to learn more about that. So, are pronghorns subject to chronic wasting disease? Ooh, good question. I don't know for that one. I know obviously cervids or deer are really vulnerable to that. I will look into that and let you guys know. So make notes. So. Yeah. All right. Well, otherwise, thank you, everyone. We'll see you in December. So thank you.